It's time for another Disney book review, and this month, we're storming the Magic Kingdom. Hello everybody, and welcome to my Disney book review series, the series in which I talk about all of the latest Disney books that I've been reading. I like to preface these videos by pointing out that these book reviews are not literary criticism. I'm not here to talk about how well the author crafts a story and how well they write. That's sort of not my wheelhouse. But what I do like to talk about is what these books offer in terms of Disney knowledge and Disney history and what kind of Disney fan might appreciate them most. And this is a really interesting book that I'm talking about this month. This is Storming the Magic Kingdom, Wall Street, the Raiders, and the Battle for Disney by John Taylor. Now, this is an interesting one because this is not a new book. It's not a recent book. In fact, this book is literally as old as I am. It was published in 1987, and I thought that was a very interesting point in Disney's history for a book like this to be published. It is a book, in short, about the very rocky times that Disney faced in the early 80s that saw them ousting the old guard, Ron Miller, and replacing him with Michael Eisner and Frank Wells, which would then catapult Disney into like the mega corporation that we know today. And what I thought was really interesting about the book's premise is that by being written in 1987, it didn't have the context of what was to come for the company. We know today that Eisner and Wells was the perfect choice because they, brought back Disney animation in the Renaissance, and they, grew the parks and added all these extra theme parks and turned this company into a behemoth. 90s was known as the Disney decade, but this book has none of that because it was written in the late 80s. So it really just covers the period of about a year or so where Disney was at its most vulnerable for a hostile takeover in Wall Street. So, as far as who this book is for, I would say it is for not only fans, like hardcore fans of Disney, it's for fans of Disney who like to know about the inner workings of the company. I would suggest this book for people who like other books such as Disney War, Work in Progress, Michael Eisner's book, the ones that focus less on the creativity of Disney and more about the business. There is no mention in this book about the magic of Disney. Its few references are related to how it is a hard asset and what that does for the company's bottom line and stock prices. It doesn't talk about, the magic of animation or Walt's dreams of storytelling just in the context of this is a business. And so, if you're looking for that, if you want to know how Disney was in the 80s in terms of creating their films and, improving on their theme parks, you're not going to get any of that. This is really about Wall Street. This is about, this sort of atmosphere in the early 80s where there was a lot of hostile takeovers of publicly traded companies. And at one point, Disney, which wasn't really growing in the 70s after Walt had passed away, was the target of one of them. And so this book is more about that battle. It was about Roy Disney trying to save the company and trying to do it by any means necessary. And that's what I found interesting, which I'll get to in a minute. But really, it's about them trying to get rid of the current leadership, who is Ron Miller, who is Walt's son-in-law, who is running the company, and replace him with somebody new who could better run the company. Now, what I really enjoyed about this book, what really stood out to me and made me glad that I read it, was that it took something very small that is often a footnote in these other history books, which is that Disney had rocky times in the 80s and they eventually put Michael Eisner in charge, and it expands it into this whole story, which itself is really dramatic. It's interesting. I knew what was going to happen with Disney. I know who ends up as CEO at the end of this book. Yet reading it, I really didn't know how they were going to get there, because when they were at risk of being taken over, there was a lot of different options that Disney had to try and save themselves. And some of them were really bad. Like, one of the options they had considered was essentially Roy was considering borrowing money to buy Disney, which he would then have to sell off a part of it. So he might have to have sold the theme parks to then pay off those loans. So it was essentially cannibalizing the company, breaking it apart just to save certain parts of it. And at one point he was interested in just buying out the movie studio. And so seeing all of these possibilities of where Disney could have gone, It's really interesting to see how we ended up where we did. Now that said, like I said, this is a business book. It is not an easy read. I'll be honest, towards the end of it, a lot of it got very foggy to me. There's a lot of business talk and specifically Wall Street related, stock buyouts and leveraged buyouts and all this stuff that, at first the book will do a decent job of trying to explain to somebody who's not in that industry, but it could get very muddy very quickly. A lot of names thrown around that get used over and over, a lot of legal firms and stuff like that. But, from a story perspective, I think it tells an interesting story. I think for any hardcore Disney fan out there, it's worth reading because this is a really critical part of Disney's history that I don't think gets a lot of coverage. Noted by the fact that this book's 30 years old, and I don't think there's been a book since then that goes this in depth into what happened back then. So check it out, Storming the Magic Kingdom by John Taylor. It's an interesting read. It's one I'm definitely glad I read. I wouldn't rank it up there with books like Disney War or Reality Land, but it is one of the more entertaining that I've read. Anyway, if you've read it, I'd love to hear what you think. If not, I'd love to hear what kind of Disney books you're into. This is something I try to do every month or so. I'm always looking for that next Disney book to read, so throw your suggestions in the comments below. Thank you all for watching. If you want to see more Disney videos just like this, all you have to do is hit that subscribe button, as I do 3 a week. And I'll see you next time for the next Disney book review. Bye, everybody.